amplify his voice. In doing so, he stands as a beacon and reminds us all that our duty as Catholics, as faithful followers of God, is to listen for God's voice in the church and amplifying that still small voice of conscience in the world. But that delineation is not neatly made in real life. And Frank, I think, would concede that. In fact, his book, organized this way, effortlessly weaves together his commitments and his wisdom as both a priest and a lawyer, a man of faith and a man of the world. And as a legislator and a Catholic when faced with a conscience vote, I found that need to weave, that need to take data points, if you will, in this book, but also in his pastoral work, to assist people, whether they're at the coalface, in their homes, in their workplaces, in their communities, to fully form their own consciences, is something people truly do want and need. It is a leadership gift to our Australian community. Now, I'm somewhat schoolgirlishly say, always considered Frank Brennan a bit of a hero, and have always looked up to him. In fact, I remember I'd taken my boys, when they were about 8 and 10, on a trip to Canberra to see the sights of our nation's capital. And we went along to Mass at Yarralumla, unaware that Frank was going to be the celebrant that day.
Decision makers, people in authority, be it the Parliament, judiciary or the Church, all feel the need to protect their established positions. Move to review, to refer and implement new measures is never easy. Yet the place of that still, small voice is where Father Brennan hits his straps. The institutional church to the stand of the establishment. The right of partners to be honest in their own sexual matters is given due place in this book. We all admire and care for Frank Brennan. As a searching believer and true lover of people, I suspect he deeply needs our encouragement. I remember once here at Melbourne University at a large conference lecture in our Arts Public Lecture Theatre, the urbane and controlled Father Brennan cracked. His voice wavered and tears fell upon the lectern. He was on delicate ground in his quest to support our Indigenous people. He was exhausted. Through Margot and Rick, he had emptied himself out. Paul calls it kenosis. This was a time when he had to step back and let the first people of this country run with their own ball. He was worried that, like white men and women, the black people could tear themselves apart. It was a time to let go, to trust, to hope, to pray. Throughout this book, Frank's love, care and professional expertise is gently offered to Aboriginal elders and people. And he does this with gracious ease, not with patronising authority. Well, it's a great read. What a true man, priest and scholar, a national treasure indeed.
The poet sees that declaration as a still small voice, the equivalent of a gold standard in the monetary system, reminding nations of the obligations they've signed. Of course, that's his departure point. But of the still small voice that institutions sign up to, the church, religious orders, government, state and federal, and international organisations. This still small voice that's amplified, Frank holds to account, like that gold standard in the monetary system. As I say, he's not afraid to hold his own church, his society, indeed the community of nations, to the values that they espouse. His baseline, not surprisingly, because he's a Jesuit priest, is his belief that God is to be found in all things, and we are called to discern that presence in the life of every person. The Human Rights Act, or Bill of Rights. Now the picture on the front of the book, which we can see here, that has the whitest of white fellas towering over the black fellas protesting in Kalgoorlie, was taken when his panel was seeking submissions in Western Australia. Their visit happened to coincide, this isn't the book of course, happened to coincide with the coronial inquest into the death by heat exhaustion of the Aboriginal prisoner Ian Ward. Frank advised his panellists to stay out of sight, but he was caught. A couple of the Aboriginal protesters recognised him and said, "Father Frank, come over here." So he had one of those moments when he was confronted with a moral imperative, I guess is the best way to put it. Now his solidarity with the view expressed in the placard, "White Australia has a black history," appealed to Frank, and he wanted to put this on the front cover of the report of the consultation, but it was thought to be a little bit too controversial. But fortunately, when you write your own book, you don't have to worry about it. There's the picture. Land rights, and Australia had come some way in recognising land rights. But he divides the antagonists to the debate over these issues into realists, liberals, not capital L liberals, but liberals, and idealists. And it seems to me, reading the book and knowing him as I do, and having heard him on many occasions, I think Frank probably fits into all camps, depending on the arguments. In fact, in his book, No Small Change, there is the realist comes forward in his appraisal of how we could achieve recognition, which he applies without allowing his idealism to be extinguished. In the church under Pope John Paul II and Pope Benedict, where freedom of expression in even spoken love was discouraged and condemned. And the voice, the still small voice amplified by Frank Brennan over those years, has given many people, but particularly Catholic people, much heart. And seeing that we're here in Canberra, experience of that is to be found in the work he does in the parish over at Curtin, where the Church of the 21st century should be the exemplar of due process, natural justice and transparency, purifying, strengthening, elevating and ennobling these riches and customs of Western societies, values that the Church itself helped to found and foster, and in so many instances falls short.
Father of all, you gather us the dreaming. You have spoken to us through our beliefs. You then made your love clear to us in the person of Jesus. We thank you for your care. You own us. You are our hope. Make us strong as we face the problems of change. We ask you to help all the people of Australia to listen to us and respect our culture. Make the knowledge of you grow strong in all people, so that you can be at home in us and we can make a home for everyone in our land. Pope Francis is speaking of when he says in Evangelii Gaudium, I prefer a church which is bruised, hurting and dirty because it has been out on the streets, rather than a church which is unhealthy from being confined and from clinging to its own security. I do not want a church concerned with being at the centre, and which then ends by being caught up in a web of obsessions and procedures. If something should rightly disturb us and trouble our consciences, it is the fact that so many of our brothers and sisters are living without the strength, light and consolation born of friendship with Jesus Christ, without a community of faith to support them, without meaning and a goal in life. More than by fear of going astray, my hope is that we will be moved by the fear of remaining shut up within our structures, which give us a false sense of security, within rules which make us harsh judges, within habits which make us feel safe, while at our door people are starving, and Jesus does not tire in saying to us, give them something to eat. In his collection of essays, Frank has certainly given us plenty to chew on. He amplified that still small voice in the church, in which the world, in the Ignatian tradition, small voice in the church and in the world, in the Ignatian tradition, to find God in all things and to discern God's presence in the life of every person through justice, transparency, due process, and dare I say love. The force that sustains all humans living together. Finally, this order is to achieve increasingly more human conditions of social equality without any impairment of freedom. In the same essay, Frank points out that the Church cannot credibly proclaim a message of social justice in a pluralistic democracy when its own processes fall short of ordinary community standards of justice. It needs to turn its teaching about human rights and human dignity back on itself, the Church, insisting on due process within the life of the Church community. The Second Vatican Council established the tools for this to happen, the Synod of Bishops, which unfortunately has become a consultative body since the Synod on Justice in the World in 1971. At that Synod, the Synod document was issued by the gathering of bishops themselves. Father Donald Dorr, writing on the 40th anniversary of that Synod, speaks of the sharp contrast to what has happened at all later synods. At subsequent gatherings, the bishops merely handed over to the Pope the sanitised results of their deliberations and left it to the Pope to issue a document sometime later based on whatever parts of these deliberations were acceptable to the Vatican. It is very likely that if this had happened in the case of the Synod of 1971, the final document would not have included its more radical and controversial aspects. The first of these is its statement that, and I quote, action on behalf of justice and participation in the transformation of the world fully appear to us as a constitutive dimension of the preaching of the gospel and the advocacy of Frank Brennan, as seen in these essays and in his work in the public forum. Justice has been kept as a constitutive dimension of preaching the gospel. Pope Francis' experience in Argentina taught him how important it would be for the whole Church to be involved in the Synod process. It revealed if renewal was to happen and the Church's teaching on marriage and family was to be reclothed to remove obstacles and change attitudes that were hiding the face of Christ. He also remarked that celebrating the Mass and praying with lay people at the Marian shrine during that time gave a live sense of belonging to our people, of the Church that goes forward as the people of God, and of us bishops as its servants. Francis, in inviting the whole Church to dialogue with him and be aware of the temptations faced in dialogue, and that were faced by the Synod Fathers as they came together in dialogue and encountered different views. Temptations of inflexibility, to treat the symptoms and not the cause and roots, not to see that the heavy and unbearable burdens that people carry, to bow down to a worldly spirit instead of purifying it and bending it to the Spirit of God, to think that we are owners of the faith instead of guardians, and to use meticulous and soothing language that says nothing. Oscar Romero's essays will provoke, will unsettle, will get under a number of skins. They enflesh the gospel and stand in their own right as a living fifth gospel, keeping alive the dangerous memory of Jesus by telling his story as it lives and breathes in the lives of Aborigines, asylum seekers, the dying, same-sex couples, placing the individual's formed and informed conscience at the centrepiece in any work for justice, in the Church's handling of child sexual abuse, the marginalised, and the gentle breeze of love, compassion and mercy that amplifies that still small voice. Love and support, assure him he always has mine, and to commend this book to you as it invites us to act and live justly, realising that life is about being loved. Thank you.
Who had been the school captain of Downlands when I was in grade 8. And he was a respected solicitor in Toowoomba, and in fact he was running the law firm which had been the law firm of my grandfather, Frank Tennyson Brennan. And that night he presented me with a copy of the Commonwealth Law Reports from the year 1913, the year in which my grandfather had gone to establish the firm of Cleary & Co. in Toowoomba. And it was that night of the concatenation that a few of us had dinner after the talk, and we were discussing the situation where it had come to light, though we weren't supposed to know it, that Bill was under intense Vatican investigation for his errant views, though we didn't quite know what those errant views were. And in fact, we still don't quite know what those errant views were. But with Pat Noonan, myself and a few others there, we said, there's a need to do something about this. We've got to apply the light of day. There's got to be transparency. There's got to be due process. And a couple of the diocesan clergy there, Jeff Scully and Peter Dorfield, they said to me, well, you're a lawyer, you're a priest, how about you do a report on it? I said, no, well, that wouldn't be transparency at all. I said, what we've got to do is we've got to find a very respected, retired judge who's a fine Catholic layman and get that person to do an inquiry in a dispassionate way. And as many of you would know, the person we chose was none other than the late Bill Carter, who sadly passed away just a couple of months ago. And Bill did an absolutely sterling job. He brought judicial impartiality and a passionate love for the Church to bear, and he could not believe what he saw in terms of the evidence. And so he put it all out there, and I think it was a great service to the church community. After Bill published his report, there was then some consternation. A few of the bishops and others said, oh, well, of course, the thing is that Bill Carter, he's not a canon lawyer, he's only a civil lawyer. And I remember the Toowoomba priest came to me again and said, well, what do we do now? I said, we concede, absolutely. Yes, you're dead right. Bill Carter is not a canon lawyer, and that's what's missing in this. What we need is a truly outstanding, independent-minded canon lawyer to have a look at Bill Carter's report. So we lined up Father Ian Wartons, who was the canonical vicar for the Archdiocese of Melbourne. He looked at Carter's report and was prepared to publish his opinion that yes, this is a gross violation of canon law in terms of what has gone on. So from there, it was, we thought, game, set and match. But it wasn't, because, as we know, there were forces at play in the Holy See. But what we do know is that there have been learnings from that. There's the empowerment of the laity, and there's been the espousal of the virtue of someone like Bill, and it's a great privilege to have Bill here tonight to launch the book for that very reason. And then, just to say another word about family, and with Shannon and her children having said the words that have been said, it's a great privilege for me, as you've heard, that the book is dedicated to my parents, to Shannon's grandparents, which is one of the largest, it's the largest Jesuit university in the United States, and I occupied quite a prestigious chair there, the Gasson chair. It's prestigious in the sense that you don't have to do very much except write and think and sit around and talk to people. And so I did a lot of that. And as some of you would be aware, I've been pretty involved in some pretty hairy politics in Australia for many years on all sorts of things. And there's no substitute for going to a foreign country. There's no doubt that even though Americans might speak English, it is a very foreign country. I finished 2 books. One was this Amplifying That Still Small Voice, published by Hillary's ATF Press, and another one called No Small Change, just published by University of Queensland Press, looking at the question of whether or not we can move towards Indigenous recognition in the Australian Constitution. So I want to speak something about both books and both topics in that regard. Once described me as an ethical birder in the nation's saddle. One of the things being in Boston this past year was that Rudd was also in Boston. He was over at Harvard. And so we used to see each other quite regularly. Sometimes he followed my advice, although there was one piece of my advice he definitely did not follow. Every time I saw him, I used to say, under no circumstances should you speak to any Australian journalist about anything at all. He came back and recorded some TV interviews, and you're watching those at the moment. Now, during my time there, I reflected on a number of things, including that Kevin Rudd, when he was Prime Minister, appointed me to conduct what was called a National Human Rights Consultation, which was to get around Australia getting a sense of the protection of human rights in Australia. I've just been today at lunchtime addressing the Commonwealth Attorney General's Department on issues to do with constitutional change. So I was back in the building where I used to have a secretariat of 13 members when I was conducting the National Human Rights Consultation. And I joked with them at lunchtime today that I had once commented that all 13 members of my secretariat were young women lawyers. And I asked whether any blokes in Attorney Generals did human rights, and they said no, they all do corporate or criminal law.
Strengths of this book tonight. But one would have to be in awe of Frank's ability to choose the timing. I mean, who else could have a book launch which combined both the anniversary of Magna Carta and the Pope's encyclical on the environment? I have read every page of this book, and I found it informative and inspiring, positive and encouraging. And I'm taking great pride in being able to claim brotherhood with you in society. Frank's walked the Australian stage and invited by a whole range of believers and unbelievers, a rare person who can talk across that gamut. In the Jesuit parish, where Frank has given many commentaries, and we are under the 9 eyes of the parish priest. Very well. Frank is a commentator. Everybody in the parish knows that Father Mullen is an outstanding commentator. He comments on anything at all. But I'd like to situate Frank briefly within the long pageant of identities of the Society of Jesus in this country, who've been contributors to social debate on issues of justice and equity. It has been a very strong tradition and something that meant a lot to Frank. It's an important note, this line that Frank stands in, how involved the Jesuits had been in issues of social justice since the very beginning, and the defence of the vulnerable from the earliest times. The first Irish Jesuits arrived with, we have a celebration coming up, 2 batches, 1865 and 1866. And Father Isaac Moore was one of the first group, and within 2 weeks of arriving, he was giving lectures on Catholic socialism, all printed in the Argus. And one of those very first Jesuits, Irish Jesuits, was William Kelly, extraordinarily gifted man, who immediately took up the cudgels on behalf of the Irish Catholics, who were then subject to all types of discrimination. This audience of literally thousands in Melbourne, and the discriminators found themselves having to contend with a man who was a polymath in his intellectual ability. Then it went on in the 1870s, the education debate, where the Jesuits were key participants about that, the justice of the people. In the 1880s, the Jesuits from here, from South Australia, became strongly into the picture defending Aboriginal people, especially those in the Northern Territory Mission, where both Anton Strehler, the Austrian, wrote letter after letter, attempting to diminish the tide of negativity that was flowing against Aboriginal people in those decades, who then were our first Australians regarded as an evolutionary oddity, and the role of the whites was now to soothe the dying killer. And Donald McKillop, SJ, brother of Mother Mary, wrote letters to the Sydney Morning Herald and The Age, which we still regard as stronger in sentiment than anything possibly with public sense. In the First World War, there were the campaigns of Father William Lockington, a New Zealand Jesuit, defending people in the menial occupations. Criticised an overbearing government are not rare in Australia. This anniversary of Magna Carta about the limiting the power of the king. But goes to start with Bishop B. Colvin himself, Bishop Wilson. And there's been an extraordinary contribution of Catholic priests to defending the rights of the poor and the downtrodden in but it's one thing to criticise the bureaucrats. It's quite another thing to criticise the church hierarchy. You just have to go back to Savonarola, and some critics have often ended up in either a sticky or a fiery end. And with his love for the church on the one hand, and his undoubted loyalty to it, we sense the privacy of conscience and need always the rights to be protected. Frank has engaged a hierarchical church with respect, and has taken up the case of men like Bishop Bill Morris and Jeffrey Robinson, who have suffered because of their opposition to certain areas. And we all know priests around the era of Mano Vito who are no longer priests because of the consequences of their unforgiveness, and how men like former NSC priest Paul Collins became distant from their religious community. It's a difficult and tense area. But all this shows that in the church sometimes it's easy to say, rather than it's easier not to say, than to say. And the days in Marbo, I know Frank can do a great offer for you. I received most of literature, and I got serves from some of the parents up there about this man who was